LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 3rd edition of LiberalViewer Monday Meeting Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the dozen best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. My main topic is Fox News says Biden hurricane relief is racist because of equity. And I'm going to order my clips a little differently than I usually do because I want to address this topic first with a bunch of newsmaker clips from yesterday's Sunday shows that I'll show before the news summaries this week. But I have to start with this amazing piece of Fox News bias attacking Vice President Kamala Harris for bringing up the need to consider equity, not just equality, when recovering from Hurricane Ira. And I'll explain the difference after we watch Harris Faulkner and Peter Doocy engage in some amazing Fox News bias in this clip from the Faulkner Focus this morning over here.
We begin with this Fox News alert. Vice President Kamala Harris willing to do the unthinkable, divide Hurricane Ian victims by race. Was she trying to say she would prefer to help the one she chooses first? The VP with some controversial comments about who should be first in line for relief just days after historic Hurricane Ian hit. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. The storm, as you know, was just shy of a Category 5. It tore apart southwest Florida, brought a 500-year flood all the way across the state to cities like Orlando last week. At least 80 people so far confirmed dead. Damage estimated to be in the billions of dollars, and with so many people in shock and heartbroken. Here's a word from the second in command in the White House.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. So we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity.
The backlash was immediate. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign tweeted, "This is false. The VP's rhetoric is causing undue panic and must be clarified. FEMA, individual assistance, is already available to all Floridians impacted by Hurricane Ian, regardless of race or background." South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace with this.
It's literally the definition of discrimination. Hurricanes don't see color. Hurricanes don't see political affiliation. Hurricanes don't see gender. All they see is destruction along the coast where they hit. And it is incredibly racist. Can you imagine someone saying the exact opposite, that only whites and men should get hurricane resources first? I mean, that's crazy town. And the fact that the Vice President of the United States is making those kinds of comments shows a lack of leadership.
Peter Doocy is live for us outside the White House, wondering if any comment has come with regard to this. Peter.
No, Harrison. The vice president had a chance to clarify what she meant in this comment that sounds like race-based relief from the hurricane, but she didn't.
So, Mr. President, can you clarify what you meant about equity for hurricane relief?
Well, now Republicans in the Florida delegation are wishing that she would set this politically charged rhetoric aside.
Listen, I couldn't disagree more with the vice president. Now is not the time to be talking about who gets what based upon where you started. It's about helping people, making sure they get the resources they need as quickly as possible, helping them recover as quickly as possible. That's what matters. That other stuff can wait for another day.
And President Biden has been striking a different tone, tweeting the following: "This is not just a crisis in Florida or in South Carolina or in Puerto Rico. It is a United States crisis. We'll do everything we can to get these communities back on their feet." And there's nothing about equity coming from the FEMA director either.
Less impact. We're going to support all communities. I committed that to the governor. I commit to you right here that all Floridians are going to be able to get the help that is available to them through our programs.
So she is in charge of the relief, and she's talking about all Floridians. That is different than what we're hearing from the vice president in that comment. Harris.
And that last part is totally bogus. I'm going to show you a much longer clip from the FEMA administrator, Deanne Criswell, who actually supported what Vice President Harris said. And by the way, right under the video description, I put a link to my Fox News bias videos, because this is going to be a new Fox News bias video, and you can watch over 200 examples of Fox News bias at that link, and then also bias in their video editing, because I believe they edited Vice President Kamala Harris's comments and also the comments from the FEMA administrator to fit their anti-equity bias. And the thing is, I don't know if you all are familiar with the difference between equity and equality, but it's not about keeping resources away from white people or rich people. It's making sure that those people, they're focusing on the race part, but actually Vice President Harris said low-income people and people of color are the most impacted. And so people who don't, and she also talked about people who don't start off in the same place so that they need more help. And later I'm going to show you a clip of Senator Rick Scott, Republican, who, first I'm going to show you a clip of him claiming that what Vice President Harris said was racist, but then later I'm going to show you a clip of him also saying that poor people are most impacted, which is kind of what Vice President Harris said. And by the way, in terms of the difference between equity and equality, one of the images I've seen in a lot of different versions around the internet here, I found one copy that I could license so that I can use it in my live stream without copyright problems. So suppose you have like 3 packets of help to give out to people to help them with this barrier, which is represented by this fence. I've seen it with like people trying to see a baseball game over the fence or whatever. And so one way to give out those 3 packets is equally, one to each person, the tallest person, the middle person, and the shortest person, which actually helps 2 people to see over the fence, but not 3. But if you look at it in terms of where they started out, and you give out those 3 packets, the tallest person doesn't need any help. The next tallest person just needs 1 packet, and then the shortest person gets the 2, and now everybody can see over the fence. So you've helped everybody to overcome the barrier. And I mean, that's kind of like, there are some people who are rich and totally insured, and they don't need help from the federal government and FEMA to recover from the hurricane. And then there are people who are like not rich and partially insured, and then there are people who are poor and lost everything and have no insurance. And so each of those people need different amounts of relief. That's the difference between giving equitable relief or giving everyone an equal amount no matter where they started off. So I mean, Fox News never even talked about what is the difference between equity and equality, and what Vice President Harris said makes complete sense. You can let me know in the comment section if you disagree, but now I'm going to show you a bunch of clips, newsmaker clips that sort of address this and whether it's racist. And then there was actually a really racist thing that the head of the Republican Party did. Donald Trump, of course, is the head of the Republican Party. He put out this tweet attacking Mitch McConnell, saying that he has a death wish for agreeing to continue, not shut down the government with some spending that I guess Donald Trump doesn't like, and then also attacked the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's wife, calling her a China lover because she's Asian, and it was like totally racist. I mean, if you want to see something racist, it's in the tweet that you'll see Margaret Brennan ask Rick Scott about on CBS News' Face the Nation in this next clip. And it's pretty ridiculous. I'm going to show you 2 different cross-examinations with him. He never actually condemns Donald Trump's tweet and the racism. He just says, racism is bad. No one should be racist. He won't say Donald Trump shouldn't be racist or Donald Trump shouldn't tweet this racist thing. It's just like nobody should be racist. That's all he'll say. We should all avoid racism. Senator Rick Scott of Florida comes out with the very controversial position against racism, but not saying anything about Donald Trump's racism, and even brings up this ridiculous idea that what Vice President Harris said was racist. And anyway, I'll talk about that with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Senator, before I let you go, I do have a bigger picture question because, disasters are a time when people can come together, and our country is so incredibly divided. I know you know that. Over this weekend, we heard some pretty disturbing rhetoric from the former president who tweeted that Senator McConnell has a death wish. He said some racist things about his wife, the former cabinet secretary, Elaine Chao. Last night at his rally, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene made a false claim that Democrats want Republicans dead, and they have, quote, already started the killings. Given the level of security threat right now, would you rebuke those comments?
Well, I think what we got to do is we got to bring everybody together. I would also say that what Vice President Harris said yesterday, that or day before yesterday, that if you have a different skin color, you're going to get relief faster.
That's not what the Vice President said.
So I think what we've got to do.
That's not what the Vice President said. She talked about equity and the problem within FEMA. But I'm specifically asking you about Marjorie Taylor Greene and President Trump.
Wait, Margaret, let's make sure. FEMA has to be colorblind. FEMA has to provide support to everybody. Now, here's what I'll tell you. I believe that we've got to do. President Trump has talked about this unbelievable spending that's causing inflation hurting the poorest families. I grew up in a poor family. I watched inflation hurt my mom. We've got to watch how we spend this money.
I know, sir. You're talking about substance, and I would love to talk to you about that. But what I quoted you was a phrase saying McConnell has a death wish. He said racist things about Elaine Chao. And then they have already started the killings. I mean, that's not a policy dispute, Senator. The language is what I'm talking about. Isn't that dangerous?
I think we all have to figure out how do we start bringing people together and have a common goal to give every American the opportunity to get a great job, their kids to have an education they believe they can be anything, and make sure everybody lives in a safe community. That's what I do every day, and I try to bring people together to do that.
And you would agree that that language doesn't bring people together?
I believe that what the President Trump was talking about is the fact that we can't keep spending money. We're going to hurt our poorest families the most with this reckless Democrat spending, and we got to stop it. We can't cave into their spending.
Okay, that's not what the former president said. And Coco Chow was the phrase he used to refer to a former cabinet secretary, Elaine Chao.
He likes he gives people nicknames. I'm sure he has a nickname for me. All right. So you can ask him what he means by his nicknames. What I want to make sure is what I can do. I can try my best to bring people together, and I'm going to try to bring people together.
Okay. But I know, Senator, you know that Democrats have not already started the killings of Republicans, as Marjorie Taylor Greene has said.
I didn't see what she said, but it's also not helpful what the Vice President says when she thinks that FEMA is going to treat people differently based on their skin color.
We will have the FEMA administrator on the program to talk about equity, but already started the killings really stood out to me, so I wanted to make sure you responded to that comment. We'll leave it there. Thank you and good luck.
I didn't hear it. Let's bring people together. Please pray for our state.
So, yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good cross-examination by Margaret Brennan. I mean, I think she showed Rick Scott wasn't answering the question. I think it's better than the one I'm going to show in the clip after next, Dana Bash, cross-examining Rick Scott on the same issue there, although Rick Scott doesn't bring up the Vice President's comments about equity. And you saw there that Margaret Brennan promised that she would bring up the equity comments from the Vice President with the FEMA Administrator, Deanne Criswell, and I'm going to show you the entire response that was so viciously edited in a biased way by Fox News. And the first clip I showed, where they made it seem like Deanne Criswell was against what the Vice President said, which is not true. She actually supported the comments from the Vice President. And, under the video description, I put a link to 200 plus Fox News bias videos, and then right under that a link to my Fox News bias in video editing playlist. That's a whole subset of, because Fox News does so much bias video editing, and when you watch this whole clip from the FEMA administrator, you can see how they totally took what she said out of context. All Floridians. Well, equity doesn't mean that some people who need help aren't getting help. It means the people who need the most help are getting the most help. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Margaret Brennan follow-up with the FEMA administrator about what Rick Scott said that was so ridiculous over here.
You heard the interview with Senator Scott, and he talked about your agency. He brought up comments from Vice President Harris, and I want our viewers and you to listen to what she said.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. And so women. Absolutely. And so we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
Yesterday, Florida's governor's spokesperson said that comments are causing undue panic and must be clarified. You're here. I'd like you to clarify them because Senator Scott called on FEMA to be colorblind, really insinuating you're not.
Yeah, look, Margaret, I was on the ground. I was on the ground Friday and Saturday. I was assessing the damage personally and talking to survivors. There are a lot of people that are going to need assistance as a result of this. And one of the things that I have known and I have experienced responding to other disasters, that there are people that often have a hard time accessing our programs. There's barriers to our program. And one of our focus areas since I've been in office is to make sure that we're removing those barriers. So these people that need our help the most are going to be able to access the help that we offer. I know that the Vice President and the President, they share these same values. And again, I was on the ground Friday and Saturday, and I committed to the governor then that we are going to provide assistance to all Floridians because we know that there are people that are just completely devastated from this storm. We are going to be there to support everybody that needs help.
But just to be clear here, the senator said the vice president's comments were about if you have a different skin color, you're going to get relief. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, again, Margaret, our programs support everybody. I would say I believe some of the things the vice president was talking about are the long-term recovery and rebuilding these communities to be able to withstand disasters so they can have less impact. We're going to support all communities. I committed that to the governor. I commit to you right here that all Floridians are going to be able to get the help that is available to them through our programs.
All right. And then
So, yeah, I think that full clip shows that Deanne Criswell, the FEMA administrator, was not contradicting the vice president, but was actually saying the same thing, that those people who are impacted the most need to be able to access the most resources. The whole thing about equity versus equality, and everybody doesn't need the same amount. Some people need more because they start off in a worse off position, and the FEMA administrator did not say that just by saying all Floridians are going to, all lives matter doesn't mean that some lives need more help. Equity versus equality, and I think the Fox News bias has been made clear there. Now, you saw the racist tweet from, or I guess it's not a tweet, it's a truth. That's what on Truth Social is called, a truth, not a tweet. But this is that thing that Donald Trump put out on Truth Social, where he talked about Mitch McConnell having a death wish in all caps, which some people have said is like a subtle death threat, and then also referred to his China-loving wife, Coco Chow, and Chow is even spelled wrong. That I mean, could it be any more racist? And this next clip is actually, I think this cross-examination from Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union about that Truth Social message from Donald Trump is not as good as what Margaret Brennan did in the clip before last. For some reason, Rick Scott doesn't bring up the whole issue of Vice President Harris's racism because she wants to give low-income people and people of color who are most impacted the most access to resources, which of course is not racist, as I've shown. But so he doesn't bring it up here. Dana Bash doesn't really cross-examine him very well, lets him get away with saying, she's like saying, Donald Trump is being racist. Can you condemn that? I don't think anybody should be racist. We should all avoid racism. I'm against racism, without ever saying Donald Trump was being racist with his Coco Chow China-loving comments. But anyway, here's that. Well, I don't know if maybe it's an effective cross-examination where it just shows Rick Scott unable to say that Trump is racist. All he can say is racism is bad. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I know you're understandably very focused on what is happening in your state of Florida. But I have to ask you about what appears to be a threat by former President Trump against your colleague, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. Trump said, quote, he has a death wish for supporting Democratic-sponsored bills. He also mocked McConnell's wife and his own former Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao as, quote, China-loving and Coco Chow. You're a member of the Senate GOP leadership. Are you okay with this?
Well, look, I can never respond to why anybody else says what they said, but here's what it is. The way I looked at it is, I think, what the president is saying is, there's been a lot of money spent over the last 2 years. We've got to make sure we don't keep caving to Democrats. It's causing unbelievable inflation and causing more and more debt. As you know, the president likes to give people nicknames. You can ask him how he came up with the nickname. I'm sure he has a nickname for me. But here's what I know. We got to watch how we spend our money. We got to stop this inflation. And I don't condone violence, and I hope no one else condones violence.
Nicknames are one thing, but this appears racist. Is that okay?
It's never, ever okay to be a racist. Look, I think you always have to be careful, if you're in the public, eye, how you say things. You want to make sure you're inclusive. You want to make sure, like yesterday in the neighborhood I was in, we had people probably from 10 countries that live there. And so that's what's great about this country. And what I know what I try to do is try to make sure everybody, especially all their kids, believe they have a hope and they can live the dream of this country. So I hope no one is racist. I hope no one says anything that's inappropriate. So I'm going to do everything I can.
Senator, thank you. Again, that was so beyond the pale that I really, as a member of the leadership, I had to ask you about it. But you are again, understandably focused on the devastation in your home state. And good luck over the next days and weeks to come.
Yeah. Pray for our state.
Thank you. And nowhere to run. Russia is...
So yeah, Dana Bash apologized for even asking the question sort of at the end there, and let him get away with not saying Donald Trump's tweet was racist or Truth Social message was racist, just like all racism is bad and nobody should be racist. But I mean, that's pretty weak in terms of cross-examination, if you ask me. And then the final Senator Rick Scott of Florida clip I want to show you is from NBC News' Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd asks Rick Scott about, there's this really low-quality housing that people live in. It's prefabricated or manufactured housing. It's kind of like a shipping container, like a house that comes in pieces and you can construct in a day, and they aren't very. I mean, a lot of the coverage reminded me of the story of the Three Little Pigs. The house of straw, the house of sticks, and the house of bricks. And if you got the straw and the sticks, you're not doing well. And so Chuck Todd, to his credit, asked Rick Scott about whether it should be illegal to have these mobile manufactured houses that can't stand up to winds and flooding. And Rick Scott actually makes this equity argument. He said, I grew up in a poor family and I don't want to raise housing costs for poor people. They're the most impacted when you raise, he says they are the most impacted when you raise prices, which is an equity argument. Rick Scott is making kind of the same argument as Vice President Harris, saying, poor people are most impacted when you raise the price of affordable housing. And I am currently working on issues of homelessness here in Sacramento and opposing these sweeps and criminalization of homeless people, where we should really be providing them affordable housing and services. So I can't say I'm against affordable housing, but I don't want like cheap housing that gets blown away by a hurricane. But anyway, here is Chuck Todd talking to Rick Scott, where I think he kind of makes an equity argument I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
It is the 17th hurricane that has first made landfall in Florida since 1992, and we have a graphic on our map. Some people in Pensacola are going to say, hey, you're missing some hurricanes. These are ones that hit Florida first, not Alabama first, and then impacted Florida. And it's been a total cost over recovery costs of $213 billion in losses. So the question is, as we rebuild, things like mobile manufactured housing, should that even be legal in the state of Florida anymore?
I think what we have to do is take every experience, and Chuck, if you go to Charlotte County in particular, when I did the flyover there's a lot of mobile home parks they got unbelievable amounts of damage. So you're right, we have to go back and say every time, okay, so how do we make sure that we don't? The biggest thing is we don't lose a life. That's number one. What do we have to do? What laws do we have to change? What building codes do we have to do? We did it after Andrew. We did it while I was governor. We've got to look at every time. What do you do to make sure this doesn't happen again? You don't ever want these things to happen again. So I think every county is going to have to look at that and say, does that make sense for their county? I know I'm in Collier County. I'm not sure that we do any new manufactured housing here, but every county is going to have to look at that. At the same time, people that they want to live in Florida, they want to live in the Sunshine State, and the more expensive housing you have, it makes it difficult for people to live there. So I guess it's a balance.
Well, I guess I hear you, but at what point is affordability? I get that you have to you want to err on the side of affordability. At the same time, you want to get to safety. And the fact of the matter is, these mobile manufactured homes, I understand it's a county by county decision here, but should the state step in? I mean, there's a reason why you can't get property insurance right now in many places in Florida, and this might be one of the reasons.
Yeah, I think the state has to look at all these things. I think that look, Chuck, as you know, I grew up in a poor family, so I always think about the cost of things because
right.
You impact the poorest families every time you raise the cost of something. But you also want to keep people safe. So we also have to always look at how do you make sure people evacuate, get out of harm's way as quickly as possible. I know it was a big issue that I focused on when I was governor. It's all sort of all the above, Chuck. You do have to look at what housing should we allow to make sure people are always going to be safe.
What's the best way to get insurance companies?
Did you hear there that Senator Rick Scott made an equity argument? He said that the poorest people are most impacted when you raise the price of housing or when you raise the price of things. That's almost, he didn't say poor people and people of color, though that would have also been true. But he pretty much said what Vice President Harris said in making her equity argument, but whatever, that nobody calls him racist, I guess because he said poor people and not people of color, but I think that's important to point out. And before I finish with the newsmaker clips, and then I'm going to show you all the news summaries from longest to shortest, and then at the very end I'm going to show you Marco Rubio maybe giving us a preview of how the Russian invasion of Ukraine is going to escalate into a NATO war. That's the final clip I'm going to show you, but if you want to stay tuned for that one. Oh, and thank you. I saw Tom Trask gave me a super chat contribution. A lot of times if I put the word racist in the title of my video, which means there's a good chance that this video is going to be demonetized. So I especially appreciate the people who support my videos through super chat contributions during my live streams, like Tom Trask, or actually the most dependable support at the link under the video description. I've shown you where you can become a monthly patron on Patreon, and that's what I look at to see, what's my sustainable income, because I certainly don't get a lot of ad revenue from YouTube. And there's also a link down there to make a one-time direct contribution through PayPal. at like the $5 and $10 levels. I give out, there's this hashtag LiberalViewer sticker made of weatherproof vinyl I send out, and then I'm missing my ACLU Constitution, but I have ACLU Constitutions I send out. Maybe during the next clip I'll go find one so I can show it to you. But before I finish with the newsmaker clips, one of the things I wanted to point out about Fox News Sunday, hosted by Shannon Bream yesterday, is even though Fox News has been like every hour doing a story on Vice President Kamala Harris's racist comments, race-based hurricane relief, like every hour today that's come up, for some reason they didn't cover it at all on Fox News Sunday yesterday. I guess they hadn't loaded it up into their bias canon or whatever, but you can definitely see some Fox News bias in this questioning of Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, where Shannon Bream is trying to ask him, will you attend a rally that Trump holds in Georgia if he holds one in Georgia before the November election? And you'll see Brian Kemp never answers the question, and Shannon Bream doesn't really follow up. She actually says that Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who would not steal the election for Trump, and then Donald Trump, who is viciously attacked Brian Kemp for not stealing the election for him in 2020. Shannon Bream calls them frenemies. Frenemies, never brings up the possible prosecution of Donald Trump, that there's an investigation into Trump for I want you to find me 11,860 votes or whatever it is, which is one more than I need or that we have or whatever his quote is. There's an ongoing investigation into Donald Trump for trying to overturn the legitimate election results in Georgia in 2020. Shannon Bream never asks Brian Kemp about that, never asks about his racist tweet or Truth Social post regarding Mitch McConnell and his wife Elaine Chao, never asks about Vice President Kamala Harris asking for equity. Instead, will you attend a rally if Trump comes, and never gets the answer. Anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch it together over here.
Well, I want to touch on something quickly. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that former President Trump may hold a rally there in Georgia, and they count out what they see as potential risk and downside for you if he does. Will you appear with him at a rally in Georgia?
Well, I'm not too worried about what the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's speculating on. They've been no friend of mine. I'm focused on speaking to hardworking Georgians, making sure that they know that I'm going to continue to fight for them every single day, to fight through 40-year high inflation, a disaster at the gas pump, a disaster at the border, and keep our state moving in the right direction. We got the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state. We've had 2 record years in a row for economic development. No matter what your zip code is, you have the opportunity for economic prosperity. That is what I'm focused on. I can't control a lot of things that any newspaper's saying.
Well, but if the president, former president, shows up, would you campaign with him? Would you go to a rally? I know you guys have sort of a frenemy thing going on, but would it be a benefit to you, or do you think a detraction to show up with him on stage?
Well, look, that's not anything I can control. I'm focused on what I can control in this race. I've asked all Republicans to unite and support our ticket, and that's certainly what I'm doing, and I'm sure that he is as well, because he knows, like all other Republicans and people in the middle, that the focus needs to be on this president and what he has done that is hurting hard-working Georgians. I mean, Joe Biden said he would never raise taxes on working Americans and working Georgians, and he's now done that. At the same time, spending more money when we have 40-year high inflation. That's what people need to be focused on, and don't get distracted by the arguments that Stacey Abrams and other Democrats around the country are making, because they don't want to talk about those issues.
All right, Governor, we will watch and see if that rally happens, if you attend. We thank you for your time today and hope to have the same conversation with Stacey Abrams very soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Up next, the deepening mystery.
Yeah, Shannon Bream, for some reason, kept mentioning how they'd asked Stacey Abrams to appear, and she hasn't appeared. Well, Stacey Abrams was on Fox News Sunday, at the end of June, like the last Sunday in June, and I even covered it on my Monday Media Mixup at the end of June. So I don't know why she kept stressing that Stacey Abrams hadn't responded to their request for an interview, and that was pretty softball questioning. You and Donald Trump are frenemies? Frenemies, really? That, I mean, Donald Trump has like viciously attacked Governor Brian Kemp, and he's under investigation for criminal liability for trying to overturn the results of the Georgia election in 2020. No questions about that. No questions about how Brian Kemp has to testify to the grand jury in that investigation. Nothing from Fox News on that. Nothing from Fox News about Donald Trump's racist tweet. Although they also didn't really cover the their like big story today, one day later, that Vice President Harris has said that hurricane relief is going to be based on skin color because she referred to equity. But anyway, the next 5 clips I'm going to show you are the news summaries from the big 5 corporate outlets from longest to shortest. Fox News Sunday had the longest one, but certainly not the best one. And I'll give you my criticism and commentary after we watch that. It's Shannon Bream and then Phil Keating live from Florida. I'm not going to show you the second reporter because that's been my practice, just show you the host and then the first report from a reporter, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary from yesterday together over here.
From Fox News in Washington, President Biden has declared a disaster in Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. And we've learned the president will travel to hard-hit Florida on Wednesday, where dozens of lives have been lost. Here's a look at the powerful storm surge that pummeled Myrtle Beach on Friday as Ian made landfall again. You can see how water surged over the beach and flooded the roadways. But the most dramatic images we've seen are across the state of Florida. This is just a small glimpse of the damage along Fort Myers Beach, where the recovery will take years. In a moment, we will speak with FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell about the tall task ahead for her agency. And Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is standing by with the impact on his state. But first, we have live team coverage on the ground. Molly Line in Charleston, South Carolina. But first, we turn to Phil Keating in Florida. Phil?
Hi, Shannon. The massive search and rescue operation continues again today, day 4 in the hunt for survivors, and of course, grimly finding bodies, the death count that's supposed to go up day after day. The other big job of the day, cleaning up all of this wreckage. The coastal counties in Southwest Florida all look similar to this, just wreckage and debris everywhere, plywood, aluminum siding from ripped open trailers, personal effects, just all over the place. The storm surge also came here, so every single one of these trailers that got broken into by the water force, everything's ruined, so nothing is salvageable. Over here is a car that's now ruined. The passenger side window completely blown out, plywood and other debris on it, palm tree crumbling the house. Over in Fort Myers Beach at the San Carlos RV Park, well, all of the big RVs that were left behind are now across the bay and wrecked and mangled into the trees. That was about a 12 to 15 foot storm surge there, and people who stayed tell me they have a newfound respect for the power of a storm surge. Rita and Gary Israel lived and worked there with the little dogs. They returned to discover they have lost everything. What do you see when you arrived?
What you see, devastation.
Tears.
Mess. Life gone. So we're going to start over. We're going to rebuild it. That's a plus.
You're determined.
Yeah.
Such nice people. The other big issue is returning power to everybody who lost power. Initially, 95% of all of Lee and Charlotte County households lost power, living in a blackout until sunrise. Well, now that number's down to 75%. So progress is being made. The 12-mile section of I-75 that closed on Friday night into Saturday because the Myakka River breached a levee and flooded the highway. Well, that is now reopened in both directions. Just one of about 10 rivers in Florida that are currently at record levels of depth. About 10,000 Floridians also remain in shelters right now. It's going to be another long, hot day for anybody returning to see what was left and see if they can take anything out. But it's a grim task.
Yeah, so much work to be done. Phil Keating reporting from Florida. Phil, thank you. Let's turn now to Molly Line, live in Charleston, South Carolina, with an update from there. Molly?
Yeah, and so then they move on to like the other parts of the United States. South Carolina and North Carolina were impacted by Hurricane Ian as well. But they didn't really cover the one of the controversies is the most impacted county in Florida, Lee County. They did not really give people the warning to evacuate when their own plan said that, you know, once there's like a more than 10% chance of a flooding event, they're supposed to tell people to evacuate, and they like delayed and didn't do it. And that's, I think, going to be one of the big stories of poor government that happened during the impact, you know, because what happened with Hurricane Ian, I watched too much cable news, and so I like kept watching all of the updates, and like maybe 12 hours before it hit, they updated where, you know, for most of the few days before the hurricane hit, they were saying it was going to go to Tampa, right up Tampa Bay, and that actually could have been really bad for Tampa. But then in the last 12 hours, it kind of like turned right, or what, it like hit farther south than Tampa. It hit you know, Fort Myers and Naples and Lee County, you know, Port Charlotte. Lee County got totally screwed, and they delayed telling people to evacuate. And I mean, that's like that's like the plot of Jaws, where like, you know, they don't want to like hurt the business community, so they're not going to tell anyone about the shark coming up the beach. And like Hurricane Ira was the shark. I mean, did I say Ira? Hurricane Ian. I guess it starts with an I, but no, Hurricane Ian was the shark that came like right up the beach in Lee County. And anyway, that wasn't really covered in Fox News Sunday's news summary. I think it was covered in most of the other ones, including, I think, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which Jonathan Karl was the host, and they also covered how Russian President Vladimir Putin decided to annex illegally parts of Ukraine, which was covered extensively on the news programs, although not so much on Fox News Sunday. And anyway, here is Jonathan Karl and talking about the effects of Hurricane Ian and the Russian annexation of parts of Ukraine, and then going to Rob Marciano in Florida to, like I said, talk about this Lee County problem that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, we're tracking breaking news at home and abroad. On the home front, Floridians are digging out of what is now the deadliest storm to hit their state in more than 60 years. And in Europe, a major escalation in Russia's war on Ukraine. Vladimir Putin declaring a vast stretch of Ukrainian territory is now, and he said forever, part of Russia. He announced this brazen land grab in a speech that suggested Russia is now engaged in a global war against the West, and that he may use nuclear weapons. But we begin with the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, which has now killed at least 72 people across the state of Florida, including 35 in Lee County, the epicenter of the devastation, and where county leaders are now facing questions about whether they waited too long to issue an evacuation order. Nearly 1 million people are still without power across the region. And for a hurricane that has wreaked havoc across Florida, the Carolinas, and the Mid-Atlantic region, the estimated economic damages could approach nearly $100 billion. President Biden plans to visit Florida on Wednesday. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell and Florida Senator Marco Rubio are standing by with the latest. ABC News senior meteorologist Rob Marciano leads us off from Fort Myers Beach. And Rob, as Florida digs out, the death toll keeps rising.
It does, John, and it's grim, sobering stuff. We're day 4 now, sun coming up. I mean, the only bright spot on this is that the weather has been very cooperative, the most I've ever seen post-hurricane for their rescue and recovery efforts. But now we're seeing fatalities up and over 70 here in the state of Florida, and that makes it the deadliest hurricane since 1928. And still, rescues are ongoing. As much damage as they've seen, yesterday we went out in inland areas where the rivers were still rising. There were still communities and people that were trapped by floodwaters. So we met with citizens who had their private boats and they were helping rescue people there. There was some concerns over a levee nearby, whether that was going to break, and they evacuated that area. The rivers finally this morning are starting to come down, but still, there's water surrounding even this neighborhood behind me. I want to show you this drone shot, and we've got wind damage here in Fort Myers. This has pretty much become the de facto ground zero, even as big as this storm has been. But this community is damaged by wind. It's surrounded by water, and so many communities look like this. So many communities look worse than this. The size of the scope of this thing just requires so much manpower and so much time. They've done a good job of clearing the roads for essential vehicles. There is food and water coming in, but the lines for that are huge. The lines for gasoline are massive as well, and it's just going to take some time as we go through the next few weeks. Power, we're finally under 1 million, but about 500,000 of that is in Charlotte and Lee counties. That's where ground zero is. That's where Florida Power and Light is. And even if you got power up to damaged homes like this, it does you no good. So this is obviously a disaster that will take months and years to recover from, John.
Absolutely brutal. Rob Marciano, thank you. Let's get the latest on the federal response from FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell.
And I already showed you a clip of Deanne Criswell from a different program, but the next news summary I want to show you is the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which they covered 3 important topics: the effects of Hurricane Ian and the upcoming Republican and Democratic issues that are battling for the midterms, and of course Vladimir Putin's illegal annexation of parts of Ukraine. What I think is kind of weird about this news summary from NBC News Meet the Press is, I've talked about how the corporate news media doesn't have a liberal bias, but it has a corporatist bias, which is one of their biases. Corporations are much more concerned with money and property than people and their lives. And of all the news summaries, NBC News, for some reason, really prioritize the property damage from Hurricane Ian. It's like you don't hear about the number of deaths till like 2 minutes into this 3-minute news summary on Meet the Press. They talk about the property damage so much, and the number of deaths. Chuck Todd never even mentions them. It doesn't even come up till like halfway through Blaine Alexander's commentary or reporting, and I will give my commentary on that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
For many, it's been a tough week. With 37 days until the midterm elections, it is a tale of 2 campaigns right now. For Republicans, the midterm campaign that they're trying to run is about inflation, immigration, and crime. For Democrats, the campaign they're trying to run is about access to abortion and the growing extremism of the Republican Party, represented by a singular figure in Donald Trump. But with both parties so sure what they want the midterms to be about, it is worth keeping in mind Tom Brokaw's favorite reminder to many of us during campaign seasons past: watch for UFOs. In this case, it's the unforeseen will occur. It's a guarantee, he says. Well, this week, the unforeseen was represented by 2 major events. In Russia, Vladimir Putin announced the illegal annexation of 15% of Ukraine after a series of Russian setbacks on the battlefield. Putin's war is already threatening to drive Europe into recession, soaring energy costs. And this week, a massive explosion created 4 separate leaks in that critical natural gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. President Biden accused Russia of a deliberate act of sabotage. Then there's Hurricane Ian. This is one of the 5 worst hurricanes in America's recorded history. Ian is also one of the costliest storms ever to hit the United States. Early estimates suggest it could cost up to $47 billion just in insured losses alone. And as more extreme weather events hit the United States, there are some big questions about who should pay to rebuild, and more importantly, where we should be rebuilding. Blaine Alexander is in hard-hit Fort Myers for us this morning. And Blaine, I know the destruction is awful. The question is, are we going to find more people safe and alive?
Unfortunately, that is the case. They're still searching this morning, Chuck. And, you know, it seems like these that really tell the story of Ian's wrath. This entire area where I'm standing was once a marina. It was full of boats and shops. Now all of that is gone. And when you widen out and you take a bigger look at this entire area, unfortunately, you just see more of the same. Now, where I'm standing right now is truly one of the hardest hit areas. But, Chuck, what's even more devastating is the human toll. At least 77 people have lost their lives due to Ian. And unfortunately, that number is only expected to rise. Right now, crews are still sifting through the rubble. They're trying to see if there are any lives that can still be saved, and they're recovering those who unfortunately did not make it. This morning, there are a number of people who are still unaccounted for. And, Chuck, making things only more complicated, there are at least 2 islands that are completely cut off from the mainland. The road was destroyed in the storm, so they're using boats to bring people back and forth. You know, I've talked with countless people, and they tell me the reason they stayed is that they simply underestimated the power of this storm, Chuck. And finally, we've learned that President Biden is going to come here to Florida to tour the devastation on Wednesday.
All right. Blaine Alexander in Fort Myers for us. Blaine, thank you. And joining me now from Naples is Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida.
And yeah, I showed the Rick Scott clips already, but you saw, like I said, NBC News's Meet the Press, like, barely mentioned the number of deaths, like 2/3 of the way through. Like, Chuck Todd didn't mention the number of deaths. Blaine Alexander eventually did, said like 77 or whatever, but they were much more concerned with property damage, which is that corporate news bias, since corporations don't care about people, just property and money. And anyway, I'm going to show you 2 more news summaries. Like, I think these are the 2 that mention the dereliction of duty from the officials in Lee County, like waiting for the last 24 hours to tell people to evacuate, even though there was more than a 10% chance that they were going to be hit by flooding on Sunday. But I think that's in one of these 2 news summaries. I'll start with the CBS News Face the Nation news summary. Margaret Brennan and Mark Strassman, who's not in Atlanta, Georgia, just hanging out by the CDC like he was for the whole pandemic. Here he's actually in South Carolina, which is almost Florida, I guess. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome to Face the Nation. It has been 4 days since Hurricane Ian first made landfall in Florida, and rescue efforts are still underway. The official death toll stands at around 44, but CBS News has contacted local sheriffs, and with their records, the toll stands at 77, directly or in part due to the hurricane. We begin our coverage with Mark Strassman reporting from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
For days, even weeks to come, Fort Myers Beach will stay virtually unlivable, a marathon of misery.
Everybody's tired. Everybody's stressed.
More than 800,000 Floridians still have no power. More than 10,000 evacuees now stay in shelters. Another crisis, drinkable water. In Lee County, which includes Fort Myers, a water main break means the taps run dry for its 760,000 residents. In other communities, boil water advisories are tough to follow when there's no power.
This is not just a 48-hour ordeal. This is going to be something that is going to be there for days and weeks.
With Ian's death toll climbing, a new blame game has its own fury. Lee County leaders may have dithered before ordering evacuations last Tuesday, a day later than neighboring counties. Too late for many to leave before Ian made landfall. A Category 4 hurricane churning across central Florida with a wrath straight from the Old Testament.
Ian's second U.S. landfall, the sequel no one wanted to see, happened here in South Carolina. That's the Atlantic Ocean right there, spilling here into the streets of Myrtle Beach.
Storm surge flooded this state's low-country region, but no deaths statewide and a general feeling of relief.
A lot of prayers have been answered, but I would ask people don't quit yet because it's still coming.
But Southwest Florida is in for a major rebuild, and there's no short timeline for that. Take this damaged 3-mile causeway. Sanibel Island is now isolated from the mainland. Returning evacuees feel disruption at every turn.
We go now to Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott, who joins us.
And I showed you the Rick Scott interview, at least a clip of it. Of course, if you want to see all of the interviews and all of the news programs, there's a link down in the video description to the sources of all my videos. But Mark Strassman, I think, made clear that Lee County was possibly derelict in their duty to inform their residents that there was a significant chance they should get the hell out of there before. And apparently there may be hundreds of more victims that have not yet been reported from Lee County because they're still finding the bodies. And I saw people in the live comments talking about that. And so CBS News Face the Nation, I think, did a good job on that. And I think that was also reported over on CNN's State of the Union. Dana Bash, even this is the shortest of the news summaries, and I think it also includes a criticism of the officials in Lee County. I might be misremembering, but anyway, we can talk about it more after we watch that last news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is picking up the pieces after a devastating storm. The numbers and images are staggering. At least 67 are dead in Florida, 4 in North Carolina, more than 850,000 still in the dark this morning. Hundreds of thousands now essentially refugees days after Hurricane Ian swept ashore and swept away life as many know it. Already, more than 1,000 civilians have been rescued and evacuated, according to the governor's office, and we're getting a clearer view of Ian's map-altering impact. Entire stretches of Florida coastline are now gone. Once sprawling communities like Sanibel Island are completely shattered. Homes and businesses, what they looked like before on the left and what they look like now. Piles of concrete rubble strewn on the beach on the right. Tomorrow, President Biden and the First Lady will travel to Puerto Rico, severely damaged by Hurricane Fiona, and then on to Florida on Wednesday, where estimates put the storm-related damage in the tens of billions. I want to go straight to the person leading the national recovery effort, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Administrator.
Yeah, no, I guess the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, the CNN State of the Union news summary didn't mention the dereliction of duty from Lee County there. But I also saw in the live comments, Tom Trask was... where's that comment here? Was commenting about how this hurricane is, the strength of this hurricane is the result of climate change, and that has been one of the big controversies. The thing is that climate change, there's not evidence that climate change increases the frequency of hurricanes, but it does increase the strength of hurricanes. And also, because as with global warming, as the ocean water is getting warmer, that's what gives power to hurricanes. That's why it strengthened from like a Category 3 to almost a Category 5 before it got to Fort Myers, Florida, and Lee County because of the warmth of the water. And then the other thing that climate change does, it doesn't increase the number of hurricanes, like I said, but it increases the strength. But also as sea levels rise, that makes the flooding problems worse. I mean, every inch of increased sea level means that it's almost like the equality versus equity thing I talked about at the beginning of my live stream. We're like starting off from a point where the water level is higher, and so when the hurricane comes in and there's a storm surge, we're like even more screwed because the sea level started off higher. So it's the strength of the hurricane and the baseline sea level that climate change is contributing to. Not the frequency of hurricanes necessarily, but their strength and the baseline sea level. So I wanted to mention that briefly. And anyway, I just showed you the 5 news summaries from the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, and Fox News. You can tell me which one you think was the best news summary, which one was the worst. By the way, the answer for worst, always, every week, it's Fox News, because it's not even a news organization. It's just a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. That's what it was created to be, as you can read about. That Gabriel Sherman wrote this book, The Loudest Voice in the Room, which is about how Fox News was created to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party by Roger Ailes, who has died and is probably in hell now. But anyway, speaking of hell, I wanted to talk about this final newsmaker clip that I saved till the end. This is the Marco Rubio clip. Oh, should I do a Marco Rubio? He did famously, when he did the State of the Union response, he drank water on camera because I guess he was especially thirsty. But anyway, Marco Rubio said something on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that I thought was especially notable. He's on the Intelligence Committee, so he gets to see all this classified information about what Russia might do in response to Ukraine basically winning the war in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And he said something really specific that was really, there's all this talk about Russia using nuclear weapons or chemical weapons, and Jonathan Karl didn't ask him about that or anything about Russia's response. Actually asked him about Ukraine has asked for expedited membership in NATO. What do you think about that? And then totally unrequested, Marco Rubio seems to give this information that, is he predicting what's going to happen in the future? He says that Russia is going to attack NATO countries, specifically Poland, to attack the supply chain of all the resources that NATO is giving to Ukraine. And is this a prediction of the future? That's why I saved it for the last clip. I found this to be really worrisome, not on the main topic, but worrisome enough to show it to you as the final newsmaker, the final clip for the program today over here.
Consistent on that.
And Senator, before you go, you're obviously one of the top Republicans on the Foreign Relations Committee, ranking member on intelligence. I want to ask you about Ukraine. You saw Vladimir Zelensky is asking for expedited process for NATO membership for Ukraine. The administration is saying that now is not the time to do that. What's your sense? Should Ukraine have an expedited process?
Well, ultimately, I think that's going to have to go through the normal process for expansion, and nor do I think that's the answer to the problem here. I think the bigger challenge we face right now is that between now and the time all that goes down, Vladimir Putin, I think before he does some nuclear demonstration, could very well attack some NATO distribution point, because that's who he's blaming. He's blaming NATO, the U.S., our allies, for supplying Ukraine with the weaponry that's allowed Ukraine to be so effective. So I think we need to start thinking through what's the response going to be if he attacks an airport in Poland or a train station on the border with Poland, and NATO forces that are embedded there to help with the distribution, not in combat, are killed or injured. And I think that's going to be a real fork in the road for the alliance that could come sooner rather than later. And it's the one that I focus most on right now. And I think that's really going to be the more immediate challenge here.
And we've heard from President Biden that NATO will defend every inch of NATO territory. Thank you very much, Senator Rubio. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
We turn now to Ukraine, where Russian forces have...
And actually, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, hosted by Jonathan Karl, had a pretty good report from Ian Pannell on what's going on in Ukraine and the bogus annexation of parts of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin, as he's like losing more and more, and his ill-advised invasion of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian army is actually better situated now than the Russian army, even though if you watch that report, they're talking about how it's like Ukraine is a third the size of Russia, but they have done a much better job of mobilizing and training their army compared to Russia, you know, also with support from NATO and, of course, the United States. But you know, Marco Rubio is the ranking member on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he's on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I don't know why he would like bring up that idea that Russia is going to attack a NATO country. Especially, he mentions Poland specifically, like a train station or other like Russia. It seems like he has some intelligence that Russia is going to attack the supply lines from NATO to the Ukraine, and probably in Poland. I don't know why he said that, but it seems like a prediction of the future, and a prediction of the future from the ranking Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee. So he probably knows what he's talking about, or he has at least access to the U.S. intelligence sources that would make him think he knows what he's talking about. But anyway, we'll, I guess, probably have more episodes of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mix-Up on what's going on in the Russian invasion of Ukraine and Ukraine's incredible response with support from NATO and the United States. I think that's coming up. But anyway, that was my last Newsmaker clip. I appreciate all of you who showed up for my live stream, which whatever got up to 35 people watching, and then I see at the end there, Lulu Girl was listening while in the tub and gave me a super chat contribution. So thank you, Lulu Girl, for listening to my live stream. I know some people can't watch and they just listen, or they do like household chores and listen to my live stream. And if you want to speed it up to 1.5 speed, or even 1.75, I'm not going to judge you for making that, because sometimes it can be kind of slow. I watch some of the stuff at 1.5 and 1.75 speed myself. But anyway, thank you all of you who watched the live stream live. I also appreciate the recorded the people who watch my recorded show. If you're watching this late into the live stream, I especially appreciate you for sticking it out all the way to the end. And you know, that means you should give a thumbs up to this video, and you should subscribe to my videos. If you're watching all the way at the end like this, that means you're really a fan. And there are links under the video description that you can show on Patreon or on PayPal what a big fan you are. So anyway, thank you for all the people who watch the video all the way to this end part. I hope you appreciate all the time I put into watching the Big Five corporate outlets Sunday shows and picking out the clips and capturing them and broadcasting them to you. I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday, I think, through the end of this year, and I'm going to talk about what I'm looking forward to continue this Monday media mix-up through the 2024 elections. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. I'm going to wait for some feedback from all of you. But anyway, thank you for joining me. And until next Monday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.